Good morning. Good Monday morning of a holiday week, 9 a.m. Nice to see all y'all here. We figured we'd get started on time-ish. Oh, 9 o'clock on this, 9:02 on that one. So do we believe the analog or the digital? At any rate, I'm Karen Mogus. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Water Quality here at the State Board, and I was asked by Greg and Nick to kick off this Data Science Symposium, and it's my great pleasure to do so. So welcome to the 4th Annual Data Science Symposium, co-hosted by the State Board's Office of Information Management and Analysis and the Water Quality Monitoring Council. Just by way of a little bit of housekeeping before we start off the day, if there is a fire alarm, please walk calmly and collect all of your things and go out the exits, and we gather at the 10th and J corner of Cesar Chavez Park. You can go over there, or you can go to get coffee at Starbucks or something else, but don't return until we get the all clear. There are restrooms down to the left in the hallway over here, and a cafeteria downstairs if you want some coffee or refreshments. Also note that as of just a couple minutes ago, the webcast was turned on, so this event is being recorded and will be made available to you all or anyone else that was unable to attend today in the next few days online. So again, I'm Karen Mogus. I'm Deputy Director, Division of Water Quality. I've been the Deputy Director for about 3.5 years. Today I celebrate my 10th anniversary here at the State Water Board. I spent 10 years prior to that at the Regional Water Quality Control Board in Rancho Cordova, the Central Valley region. And most of my career I have spent either designing, implementing, managing water quality monitoring and assessment programs throughout the state. Both at my regional board experience as well as here at State Board. When I came over to State Board, I managed the surface water ambient monitoring program for several years, and I cannot express how important it is for us as a community of water quality scientists and practitioners and regulators, how important monitoring and assessment is, but then also turning that data into information and making it available for answering the key questions that we have about water quality in the state. So that's what this day is all about. I encourage you to embrace the day and talk to people that you don't know and build some partnerships and collaboration around the data science that obviously we're all interested in. My role also is as the California Water Quality Monitoring Council Chair, and the council was formed by legislation back in 2006, I want to say. I'm totally going off script, by the way. I'm just like blathering, you know, I made all these notes, not even looking at them. So the way that the council has functioned, it was formed to coordinate and collaborate and make more efficient water quality monitoring in the state across state agencies. And the way that they did that was formed a number of theme-based working groups that worked around themes like safe to swim and is it safe to eat fish and shellfish from our waters. There's a number of working groups that were formed. The wetlands monitoring work group is another. And they came together as multi-state agency working groups to, and as well as stakeholders and other regulated community to pull together data around a theme and turn it into information and make it available to the public through portals. And I'll just say that they did that sort of in a stone soup way. I've got a little bit of resources here, a little bit of resources there, pull it together, and really with very minimal amount of dedicated resources, pulled together some pretty impressive portals of data. And the way that they did that is through the collaboration and partnerships that were formed in the working groups and with the support of the Monitoring Council. And again, this is a day where we can continue to foster that collaboration and coordination around monitoring data and science. So this is the first of hopefully many events that the Monitoring Council is co-sponsoring with OEMA and others to increase awareness of our working groups and hopefully participation in them. We have a poster out on the mezzanine. I encourage you to take a look at that, look at the work groups, see how they might connect with the work that you do, and if you're interested, get some more information and start participating. I also encourage you to look around and look for other board council members that are in attendance. And in fact, I'm going to make anyone, I don't see anyone off the top of my head at the moment, but if you're a council member, can you stand up? Council members, no council members are on time today. They're going to get in trouble for this at our next council meeting. They will be around at some point, but what I will do, and I know he's here, is our director, Nick Martirano, is here, and so please pull him off to the side, find out what's going on at the council and how you can get involved, and please do get involved. The value of these events and the ongoing efforts of the council's work groups lead to development of tools and guidance that help us all do our work more efficiently and answer questions that are important not only to us, but to legislators and to the public and to anyone interested in the quality of the water in California. Let's see, I already told you to look at the poster. So I'll just wrap up and reiterate that I encourage you to talk to some people that you don't know. Check out the posters that are out in the mezzanine, talk to each other, collaborate, talk about what kind of work you do, and figure out how you can maybe build a partnership or maybe the glimmer of a partnership sometime today. And so with that, it is my very great pleasure to introduce two of my board members, the board chair, Joaquin Esquivel, and board member Laurel Firestone, who will hopefully give some inspiring comments to all of you. They're always, Joaquin has been interested in data and data science ever since long before he joined the board, but has been pushing us to do more in respect to our data and our data systems and getting information out to the public. And Laurel has been a user of our data for many years and knows both the value of it and the challenges associated with data and water quality data. So with that, I will hand it over to Joaquin and Laurel.
Come down, take a seat. Yeah, please everyone come down and take a seat. No need to be uncomfortable and standing in the back. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name's Joaquin Escavel. I am the chair of the State Water Board. I've actually been a board member for 2 years, and prior to that was in the governor's DC office doing federal water policy, and then prior to that was with Senator Boxer for about 8.5 years. And when I left her office, my legislative portfolio was water, agriculture, Native American issues, ocean, nutrition, and I was the IT director. And just a few too many hats. And so that's why when I went over to the governor's DC office and just focused on federal water policy, I thought, just federal water policy, as if there is just anything water, and quickly found myself drowning in that whole space there as well. And here I am, semi above water at this point. But really impressed that here, as Karen pointed out, 9 o'clock on a Monday, we have an incredible turnout for what is, and a holiday week at that, what is an incredibly passionate item for myself. What led me to being the IT director in Senator Boxer's office was, as an intern in the office, I showed a penchant for just kind of doing small tech projects insofar as we were really reliant on fax machines then. This is 2007, about January of 2007. The amount of paper that was being printed out on a daily basis, because all of our regional offices would fax in their clips every morning, which would hit us at about noon, and we'd have a fax machine just going nonstop. And then we'd collate those and send them back out as printed copies to multiple staff. And so one of the first projects was just kind of trying to digitize a lot of that. But then they thought somehow I was a tech person, which I wasn't, because I was an English major from UC Santa Barbara, which meant I was more of a generalist at that point. I think it speaks to this moment in time that we're at, certainly, where we have an entire generation that has grown up and been a bit more comfortable with technology, that incorporates its usage in their daily lives a lot more. You have this desire to quantify one's life now, whether your Fitbit telling you how long you've slept or how much movement you've made. But I think it speaks to the way I think many of our generation really kind of approach their lives or their work or the problems that they see around them. And data being so foundational to so much of the work that we do is this space that is really exciting because we haven't yet really scratched the surface. You look at other sectors, energy, you look at the way we've now discussed the way we distribute, the way we produce, the way we consume energy, the way it factors into our economy. And it's been incredible. It's been incredible to see the jobs and the innovation that's happened. And the foundation of all that is data, is better just understanding what our systems are doing and how we're managing them or not, as the case may be. And so it is a fantastic time to be able to at least try my hand here as now chair of the board. But speaking again to those years in Senator Boxer's office, for us, we were a staff of 70, which is a little dangerous, running my own, Active Directory and my Exchange server and my BlackBerry Exchange server at the time. Oh, Blackberries. But having a staff of 70 is not having a staff of 2,000 here, and I think that's the bane of sometimes our IT department insofar as, there are lessons that scale up and there are some that simply don't. But in Senator Boxer's office, only having 70 people and having a state of 40 million, when maybe Rhode Island had a few less people, for us, technology became a really critical part about how we were able to represent the state and how we were able to better synthesize and respond to and do with less. And it's very familiar territory here at the State Board. We're a fee-based organization, as I'm sure many of you know, so we have the enviable position of going hat in hand to our regulated entities and saying, pay us to regulate you. And sometimes we may be a little under-resourced because of that. So when we talk about this work, when we talk about today, the staff time that's gone in to pull this together, it is not well accounted for in all the work that we do, but it is some of the most critical and foundational work that we do. So thank you for being here today. I want to hand it over to Laurel so she can give her gloss a bit. But we want to, I'm not speaking for very long here because I do want to reserve the bulk of the time for any questions that you may have and maybe some back and forth between Laurel and I as we kind of explore some of the themes that we'll be talking today. So Laurel, would you like to?
Hi, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to talk about data and monitoring, and especially community-driven and community-collected monitoring. I am the newest member of the Water Board and spent the last about 15 years and really most of my career working with community groups as part of a community group based in the San Joaquin Valley, working to try and ensure everyone has access to safe, clean, affordable drinking water. And when I first started, I had graduated law school and I'd been working abroad, seen a lot of challenges internationally, and realized my degree was in the US and there were also challenges here. I should probably look in my own backyard. So I got a fellowship and moved down to, I'm originally from Los Angeles. I'd lived on the East Coast and traveled a lot, but I'd really never been to the San Joaquin Valley other than driving through on the way to Sequoia National Park when I was a little kid. And I moved down to a little town called Lindsay. I was working in Delano, and I started talking to folks that were saying that their water wasn't safe to drink, that they were getting notices they didn't really understand. they were concerned. There was a lot of sickness in their community, and there was a lot of different thoughts about what was going on. And in the first year that I started working there, a lot of what I was doing was just trying to get basic public information. I will say the state water boards databases have come a long way. When I was first starting, I had to do Public Records Act requests just to get information about which systems weren't in compliance. Now we have this wonderful portal, which we will continue to improve and build on, that actually has interactive maps where you can see which communities don't have safe drinking water and which ones have been brought back into compliance. But when I first asked for this information, I remember this was before the Division of Drinking Water was at the Water Board, but I remember being told that that information is well information is confidential, that we can't share source water protection maps because because well locations are confidential, and that they couldn't give me data that I needed because actually somebody said because they worked for the utilities, not for organizations. And I remember thinking, no, you work for the public, and actually you regulate the entities. But since then, there's been a huge shift. We now have publicly accessible well locations. We can go on GeoTracker Gamma and get a whole bunch of groundwater data from lots of different sources and be able to interact and compile that. We can start to see patterns. And so what took, a lot of digging, and you guys in the back can just come down and sit. You don't need to wait. But what took a lot of digging just to get basic information on publicly available data now is much more accessible. I think there's still ways to go about making it even more user-friendly and learning more. But I think what it showed me is how powerful data and information is. And when we finally got information, what we saw was, by far the most drinking water, that there were drinking water violations all over the state, but the majority were in the San Joaquin Valley, that many of these systems had been out of compliance and had nitrate challenges for, in some instances, up to a decade or more. And we started seeing patterns. We connected with some researchers. A researcher who's now working with OEHA, Carolina Balas, did her dissertation on this and found that nitrate contamination in drinking water is disproportionately found in Latino communities, and arsenic was disproportionately found in high renter communities. So we started to see patterns about where occurrences were happening and where solutions were not happening. And so, and then over time we started working with well owners. We convinced them, we realized we had these big gaps. We only had information about the public water systems, but we didn't have information about individual wells because they're not required to test. And most of them didn't know that they should be testing. And so we helped connect them actually at the time with a Gamma voluntary well testing program that was going on in Tulare County. And in that, this was not in that case, it was really just it wasn't trying to do a representative sampling across the county. It was just asking for volunteers. So we went into areas that we thought were high risk. So it's not representative of the full county, but what we found was in those areas, 40% had nitrate over the MCL, and 75% of those wells had some kind of contaminant over an MCL, especially if you include bacteria. And so we found this population was really at risk, and so folks that were concerned had reason to be concerned, and we wanted to make sure that they could get information that was appropriate for them about what they could do. Having information about which contaminants in the water are vital to making sure that you have the right filter or that you figure out what to do. For example, nitrate, if you boil it, concentrates Whereas I think a lot of people, and with bacteria contamination, you have a boil water notice where you're supposed to boil the water. Well, if you do that for arsenic or nitrate, it actually concentrates it. So there's, I think, one thing that's like vital about data is just how important it is to our everyday lives, to our everyday safety, and to water that we interact with in such intimate ways throughout our lives, whether it's literally nourishing our body or swimming or bathing. It just impacts us in so many profound ways. And so as I started working, I think one of the things that we really, and I continue to see and believe in, is just how important data and monitoring is to making the invisible visible, like showing things that maybe people didn't see. For example, all of these communities that were on private wells where there wasn't monitoring data about what the water quality was. And so both for themselves and for regulators to see that actually there is a huge nitrate contamination problem, for example, or there's certain pesticides. And understanding, secondly, is just showing the patterns and connections to help understand and target solutions. So see where those are happening, where they're not, understand what's working and what isn't. And ultimately, just how vital information and data and monitoring is to drive actions. We, as regulators and also funders, the interesting thing to me at the Water Board is we have a huge amount of funding that we do in loans and grants through Division of Financial Assistance that is also really powerful as, the balance to our regulatory authorities, but giving us the data we need and helping us see the patterns, see where there's problems, see what's working and what isn't, is vital to enabling us to do our jobs, to making sure that we're able to meet our mission as an organization. So I think, just to, along those lines, when we started documenting and showing maps, for example, of nitrate contamination and bringing folks from that now realize that they had nitrate in their wells to the regulatory body that is responsible for ensuring water quality, which is us and the regional boards. That was really helpful for basically driving action to start regulating the source of nitrate, to start making sure that we're testing more. We now have regulatory programs for the major sources of nitrate, including irrigated lands, fertilizer, dairies, and septic systems. We have a much more broad monitoring program, and GAMA is doing work to characterize the upper aquifer and make that all accessible. So it's really vital to help us document and understand where are people impacted, where are ecosystems impacted, what is the exposure, and start to learn how are people adapting. The other thing we see, I think, is really helpful about community surveys and community collected data is you can understand what people are doing in response to the problems that are happening. So we learned more about, how are people using water? Are they buying bottled water? Are they cooking with it? Are they boiling it? And learned a lot about how most people are buying alternative sources of water, but they also are still using it to make beans, make soups, make coffee, ice, and things where they're still exposed to it in addition to showering and bathing. So they're spending a lot of money and doing and still being exposed. So I think, at the core, information is power. And so all of the work that you all are doing, whether collecting information or helping us synthesize and understand and recognize patterns, is vital for really shaping how we understand the world, how we take action in this world. It's really vital that we have communities that are most impacted or closest to where the impacts are happening be part of that. I think people say democracy is not a spectator sport. I think that's true also about water. All of our water work here in California it's not only one person's job, it's not our job entirely at the Water Board, but to accomplish our mission, we really need each of you and many other people that are based in the communities, that are near the streams that we're trying to protect, that are near the beaches that we're trying to be able to enable people to use, that are in communities with private wells or, in aquifers that are trying to be restored to help us be able to collect the data that we need and ultimately that allow us to accomplish our mission and create the kind of place in California where we have thriving ecosystems, thriving communities, and are protecting and restoring our water quality for our generation and future generations. So with that, would love to take questions and chat.
Yeah, and I will say that one of the great sort of fortunes of being at the board currently is the fact that the Division of Drinking Water came over in 2014. So we're 5 years into now the State Water Resources Control Board, in my mind, being really the first modern regulatory water agency insofar as having regulatory purview over water quality in our headwaters and streams as it makes its way down those streams onto farmland, into cities, through people's taps, out their toilets, and then back out to wastewater treatment plants and into those same rivers which someone downstream may be using, which is a simple fact that I think many people forget. But this system that we have, that we've created for ourselves, we're fortunate to be able to sort of have a regulatory purview that allows us to think, how do we better incorporate protections of source drinking water into our framework? How do we start thinking about our resources far more comprehensively? Jonathan Bishop, one of our chief deputies here at the State Water Board, says he apologizes to all the new staff coming into the Division of Water Quality because all the easy things have been taken care of over the last 30, 40 years of our regulatory programs. When we talk about the Clean Water Act and Port Cologne, our command and control regulatory structures of, measure, put a limit, and enforce to that limit have allowed us to clean up our waterways more than since we've destroyed them. But what's going to get us these next miles aren't necessarily the command and control regulatory structures, although those are foundational. It is the more collaborative work. It is these thornier, more wicked challenges that we face in non-point source pollution, in these small collective actions that add up to huge impacts in our watersheds. And how do we start to really, again, not unlike in the analogy in the energy sector and in climate change with reductions to greenhouse gas, how do we start to think about these systems differently? It's not just this thing external to us that we're protecting, but our water systems are fully integrated in who we are and what we do on this landscape. So anyway, with that, we'd love to entertain some questions from you guys,
or we
Laurel
can
and
keep
I can
talking,
just
but you guys can
be long-winded and talk. So yes. Oh, I think there'll be a roving microphone.
Hi, I'm Wynn Cowger. I'm a PhD student at the University of California, Riverside, and I'm curious about the upcoming plans for collaborating with academics to make data more available to the academic groups and more academically rigorous.
Yeah, we collect a tremendous amount of data, whether it's our national pollutant discharge and elimination system and the monitoring data that may be required in those permits, if it's on the Division of Drinking Water side, whether it's on water rights, which I'll just take a moment to add really quickly. This is the first year California has had a full accounting from their water rights holders, all their water rights holders, from the previous year's water usage diversions. That is, it's taken a while. This is the first year, because of water rights law, some of you may or may not be aware, we have what are known as pre-1914 water rights holders. They basically have water rights that extend prior to when we even had a water rights system in the state of California. So they were on a far gentler reporting timeline and requirement, same with riparian right holders, those next to rivers. they were reporting maybe once every 5 years in some case, which one wonders what the use of data 5 years after the fact is, particularly in the water rights context. But I think it speaks to, again, my real point was that we do collect a lot of data, even though that point kind of went against that point. But there are certainly gaps in those fields. But so we do and are in the middle of, we take that responsibility very deeply insofar as taking that data and pushing it back out and allowing, because we only have so much capacity. You know, Laurel was talking within our regulatory role, there's obviously certain data that we need to make our calls. But that is far more useful in the academic context, because as you begin to layer considerations, as you layer data, you turn that into information. And that is what is always missing in this equation, is that data for data's sake, you know, the numbers, they don't tell you much. And it's not until you provide that moment where you take that data and turn it into information that it really means something. So we have an open data strategy that we're currently pursuing, that is part of a resolution we passed last year that is inventorying that entire universe. What are we collecting? Where is it going? What databases is it residing in? What is it being used for? Is it being turned around publicly? Can it? Should it? Getting a better sense of our entire data ecosystem, and because of, for that very reason, that we know that it's really critical to the academic field. Right now, we're publishing most of our flat file data sets on the open data.gov, data.ca.gov web portal, and so, yeah.
And I'll
Laurel, anything on that?
I'll just add to that. You know, I think the two ways that we can best help and support academics and just our mission is, one, by making sure that our data is accessible, and this open data effort is huge. We absolutely, I think we haven't always done that in the past, and there's been fear that people will misuse data to mischaracterize things, but I think, you know, there's pros and cons to everything. There's always, that's a real challenge, but I don't think that's a reason to not make data available to help us do a better job and understand our world better. I think just, you know, you always have to weigh things, and I think that there's a real challenge around people misconstruing, you know, people can construe data and statistics in all kinds of ways. Yes, that's true. And I think if we make data accessible, then we enable people to help correct those sorts of mischaracterizations when they do happen. And so we need academics to help with that. So definitely data transparency and accessibility is key. I think the Water Board's been doing a good job of balancing that and being able to make that over the past few years slowly more and more accessible. But and also funding. You know, we actually do have a lot of contracts with academics to help us do our job and understand our data. We have in the example I was giving around nitrate, there was a big study funded for UC Davis to understand all different patterns around nitrate contamination of groundwater and drinking water. There's currently a whole effort going on with UCLA and understanding water, safe and affordable drinking water and water affordability. So we do fund and rely on academic partners to help us do our jobs, but that's really a sliver of what we hope the academic community is doing with the data and helping us understand. And so, I do think as somebody that's worked with nonprofits and community-based organizations for most of my career before this, I also think what's vital is that partnership between academics and community organizations, because every time, as a more of a community-based organization, every time we wanted to understand things, we really did reach out to academics to help us do that. I mean, I think that kind of public partnership with the folks that understand, all of the QA/QC and different analytics that can be done to pull out patterns is really important. And it also is important to complement that with the very real expertise of people that are living with these challenges and seeing where things are going on. and helping each other understand that. So really having that be kind of partnership, I think, is really vital.
At a digital sort of notification system about polluted waterways, because even really well-informed communities in Southern California, a lot of them don't know they face trihalomethanes even, and they're well-educated communities, are very affluent. And a lot of people, if it is brought to their attention, it is advertised, will make better choices. But to have to dig through those different data sets, even if they're in beautiful GIS displays, it's not given to them. So in our day-to-day, as we move through it, we are faced with all these other things that are advertised to us. So advertising and giving consumers an easier way to make good choices a habit, such as what Tosca did in transforming the nation by making things apparent to people. And now it's more difficult to make things apparent. And so something like that might help.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think it's a matter of different levels of education and information sharing. And at its most basic, you need people who don't have time to be experts in water quality or dig through reams of data or go through a GIS system and say, what does this mean? To be able to quickly indicate. And I think that's something that the Water Quality Monitoring Council has done very well around is what is something we're trying to convey, you know, the ability to eat fish in your waterway or the water quality in your beach, and how do you get it to folks? The problem is the work can be buried. And to your point, I think when you talk about what people are exposed to information-wise, otherwise, it isn't those tools that kind of rise up. And so it is about how do we work better with communities to let them know, here's a definitive place you can go to know X if you're interested in X. And I think it's really critical. And then, but it's still part of, and a continuum, if you will, of the discussions in the more, you know, complicated spaces as well in the academic space. And so it really is, I think, to Laurel's point, about better connecting those academics and communities and saying, okay, well, how do we best convey information? How do we also all settle on one way to convey it? Because it can be very conflicting sometimes.
And I'll just add, I mean, so Joaquin has been very passionate and really a leader in our information and sort of systems work internally. And as you may know, California, which, you know, you'd think, obviously our state is the center of so much innovation around technology, but our state databases aren't really in that same pace. I don't know.
Just ask the DMV.
Yeah, somehow, I mean, so I'm new to government, and it's really amazing how it's not easier to make these sorts of kind of innovative and actually like not that even high tech, but being able to like really reach people and learn from the kind of tools that the private sector has. But I think there are real limitations in that. And I'm still learning all of the reasons why. But I also think that that's really where having you know, both the partnership and feedback and dialogue with government and the private sector, including nonprofits and academics, is just, you know, how. So, for example, you know, I know there's now the algal bloom notifications and there's beach.
Right.
Yeah, so Greg, I mean, I think we've started to do a few of these safety notifications. In drinking water, they've always had an emergency notification requirement. But the technology about how it gets to people isn't always up to date because usually it's like mail. And so, and that also may not always go to the tenant if you're a renter. So I think that's where getting feedback about what is working and isn't working and trying to build things that get to the people that need to see it and are more visible is, I mean, honestly, I think government needs help from others to help us see how things are working and give us feedback and show, help us do things even better. But I will say there is a lot more energy and excitement and resources that are going towards that slowly but surely. I think both of us would many of us, both staff and board members, would love to see that go faster. And sorry, the last thing is we have this, at the Water Board, we have this Office of Public Participation. And I think one thing that is really important to us at the Water Boards is public engagement. And so really making sure that we're helping to utilize, the learning around how do people get information? And, that's changed, right? So it used to be that maybe it was over TV or something. And now it's, maybe social media or text. And so I think figuring out how to help that feedback loop between seeing what innovations are happening and learnings happening around information and visibility from in the private sector, and then helping government sort of integrate that and keep up. We're still we still have a lot of learning to do. But I don't want to say only that. We are doing a lot of exciting new things, and I think Greg in particular has been a real passionate leader in trying to free data up and allow people to get good information about what's going on in more accessible ways.
Thank you. I'm John Hunt from UC Davis. In the news lately, Governor Newsom is establishing an IT, a statewide IT agency, $40 million a year budget. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, it sounds like a lot of that is going to go to retail applications like using your credit card at the DMV. But is some of that going to filter into the type of data management we're talking about today? And if so, is that going to be an extra layer of bureaucracy that's not helpful? Or is it going to be some funding for the California Water Quality Monitoring Council? Or do you have any idea how that is going to affect the work of the State Water Board?
I have so many ideas. And I want to use it all just for us. We are thinking how best to mirror and match up and take advantage of what is a tremendous amount of attention certainly Governor Newsom has when it comes to better delivering government as digital services. And to the extent that we take in payments, there are ways that we can benefit, and I know this is a lot of the discussion amongst us agencies. How can we benefit in common pool applications or needs in there? And so to the extent that, yes, being able to better process payment, and that is actually something that we do and can help. And then there are the other things that may be a little more specific to us in the water sector. Was it Prop 5 bond that didn't make it last fall had $10 million in it actually for a water rights system for the State Water Board. And so $10 million doesn't come easy to us anywhere in our funds. And so I'm going to be looking for increased opportunities. Certainly when it comes to the dollars, we'll see how the office ends up being structured. And I know right now they're looking for someone to actually head it. Anyone here in this room is interested, there's actually a website that you can go to. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we're all savvy, so you can find it. But it is, for me as well, how do we just better account for the needs, the dollar needs on the system side? How do we at the State Board maybe better incorporating into our fee structure? How do we better resource ourselves? But very fortunate to have an administration that gets it, that we're at our heart nothing but service delivery. And we need to start taking advantage of those tools out there that allow us to do more with less, because again, to my fee point, we'll always be under-resourced in that space. So we have to start taking and utilizing these sort of tools. So, other question?
So I would say that monitoring and data transparency is kind of the more traditional aspect of data usage and data management. A lot of the promise for data science, what we're really seeing with the tech industry, is prediction and automated control. Do you have a sense for where that future lies for Cal EPA, or what the big what-if questions we can ask with data science are?
Yeah, it's exciting because we're starting to scratch that surface. I think you look at projects like OpenET, Open Evapotranspiration, where you have Google, you have in the Environmental Defense Fund, you have NASA, You have the state water boards coming together and saying, how do you create a tool that allows you to better manage using remote sensing? So use remote sensing data, better be able to know what your consumptive use of water is, use that for water budgets and water availability and water basins, and provide that to everybody, and have it be a synthesis of various models that be out there. So it's trusted, it's not ours, it's a common pool resource, it's a what I like to think of as a decision support tool. And to your point, sky's the limit there. You can think of, and I think there are already some intelligent applications. I know Freshwater Trust has, they're working with folks in Solano County with their groundwater sustainability agency and their groundwater sustainability plan using blockchain technology to have a immutable ledger, to have a back end that all the well monitoring sensors, both for quantity and the amount being pumped out, are put into a back end and create a market and an exchange for the resource to be used amongst them. So there are examples where you're starting to see the scratching of the surface, and I think that there's nothing but tremendous potential. And the problem, and we have to be careful about, and this goes to the state of our current data, the blindness the blind spots we may have, the darkness in our sort of watersheds, where we start to, and this is a conversation writ large, but it's start to build in biases or start to build in things that kind of perpetuate maybe ways of characterizing or thinking of our communities or the resources. So I think that there's nothing but potential. There's also, I wouldn't say peril, but there are considerations that when we develop these systems that we need to have. But I think that they're going to be critical because of the complexity of our watersheds. So 21st century smart watershed that has a back end that knows what are the accretions and depletions, and signaling to diverters in the watershed when best to or not be diverting to protect sensitive species perhaps, or to protect public resources. I think there's, again, a lot of potential.
Yeah, just to add on to that, so we are doing some risk analysis and sort of predictions around things already. I know for a while now, the GAMMA program has helped identify areas where, based on a number of factors and analysis in the existing data, we can predict where private wells may be at risk for nitrate, for example, or other contaminants. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of pushback by many different sectors on anything that the State Water Board does in terms of saying something is at risk or predicting what will happen. And I think one challenge with our regulatory system is that there's a lot of interests that are all have legitimate concerns about different outcomes and impacts that you may not foresee. And so any kind of modeling or algorithm used to predict things is and really should be, and I think helps improve the more that it is scrutinized and looked at. But as you can imagine, with the water quality control plans for the Delta, for example, there's a lot of back and forth between looking at the models that different agencies are using. When it impacts your water rights or your property values, people become really concerned. And so then, I think from my standpoint, that concern helps increase the amount of rigor that goes into these systems. And I think that's a good thing to help improve systems. But also, I think one challenge is it is harder for us to use those sorts of things because there is a lot of scrutiny and pushback, and we do have to be careful about the impacts of things that we put out there and what we predict. Predictions are never, they're predictions. They're not, on the ground measurements. And so there's always going to be error and changes from what's predicted. And there are consequences to that with an agency like ours. So I think, what Joaquin said is absolutely right. I think this is an area where really having robust back and forth and learning from the academic and private sector and nonprofit sector helps us all get to a better outcome than just us alone.
Sometimes it seems that there's a general discomfort with maybe more than one model in an area of a watershed or whatever it is. And often these models have a purpose, and so they're going to disagree. And so how do we start looking at more probabilities, like more probabilistic analyses, and not only that, but making people comfortable with it, whether it's the general public or the law, the lawyers, the managers. People say, you have a model, you have an answer, is that the right answer? But how do we get to this idea of like, well, there's error and there's a range of possibilities, and actually having 2 or 3 or 5 models is a good thing and not a detriment. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, well, I think, to your point, there can be this sense where, no, we just have to find the right model. And there's this one model out there that's going to account for the big everything. And it's a nice feeling to have that it's out there, but it's not. And to your point, it is about introducing a little more sophistication into maybe the discussion, getting people to realize their model isn't them, although they may have put many, many hours into it. And I think that you see that. I think you see it in sort of climate science and atmospheric science, where spaghetti, a synthesis of different models, spaghetti models, is how you get to then a better model. And it is difficult though in water, because it isn't just that one thing. It's what constituent are you trying to aim for? What are you trying to manage to? What is it that you're trying to answer? And it can get very specific, and then you can have competing models. And how you solve that, I don't know. People will be people, but I think that it helps to have these forums, to have these sort of understandings, and it is about I think the maturing of the water sector, if you will, around these tools, around their usefulness, what they can or can't tell you, and particularly in water, where people are always grabbing for that certainty. Just tell me, what is it that I need to do? What is it that we need to do, or what are we seeing? And again, when you, particularly in water, it can become so personal and passionate. Yet people that confuse themselves with their models, or with their worldviews, or get dogma, I guess. But just continued education, I think is key to it. I think.
Yeah, I think this is true in many sectors, not just water, but really humans don't understand risk very well and probabilities. And so I think there's a whole area of expertise around how do you communicate risk and probabilities, and somewhat sort of social science and human psychology or sociology of how people process the information that they're getting. And I think that's something that, another big passion of Joaquin's and mine, but that he's really led on, is around workforce diversification. And I think, in addition to the really rigorous scientific and sort of modeling technical piece, there also needs to be folks with the rigorous understanding of sort of human psychology and communication and risk communication, to allow us to make sure that people are able to understand the kind of models and predictions and what they mean. So I think one is just making sure that we're lifting up that really important vital expertise, which in some ways is arguably just as important, to be able to communicate well what we're learning. And then I don't know. I think there is just an inherent tension. I'm an attorney. There's attorneys and our regulatory system. We need rules, right? So you need to say, if it gets to this threshold, there's this consequence, or if you're over this objective, you have to do, the regulatory requirements require you to change something, or usually spend more money or pay a fine, or things that the regulated community doesn't want to do. And so that doesn't lend itself well to probabilities, right? Or those sort of risks. And so it's hard, especially if you want to build in some buffer, which we do, to try and prevent people prevent pollution, or prevent things that will be much more costly and impactful in terms of cleanup or human health or ecosystem health. You're trying to prevent that. But when you're doing it based on predictions and it's going to cost people money or it's going to drastically change their water rights or, how, I think arguably get people scared about things that maybe aren't yet a problem but could be in the future. All of those things are real concerns. I think we do, that our regulatory and legal systems aren't just inherently don't deal well with that. And then we also, the other challenge with the different models is that we also, because of our regulatory and legal system, and our sort of bureaucratic structures, we look at things as, this is focused on water quality, and this other thing's focused on water supply, and this other thing's focused on drinking water for these contaminants. And so we've sort of segmented these things, and models are built to just focus on that. But we know that water supply and water quality are linked. We know groundwater and surface water are linked, that you can't really fully separate those. And so when models are just focused on trying to predict one, they're inherently going to have errors or things that they're not incorporating. And so, I think that just goes to the more diversity and sort of different perspectives that whether it's models or people are bringing to a problem, I think the better off we get. One more?
Maybe one quick question. Sorry, last one.
I just want to say thank you for starting off this symposium very kindly, inclusively, because I know these issues are incredibly important and complex, and you've sort of started the next few days off in a great way, because obviously what happens in California impacts the rest of the country, and this is, so thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And again, thank you all for your participation over these next 2 days, and just really appreciate it. And we'll keep doing our part, and reach out anytime. We look forward to further discussion and certainly involvement. So thanks.
Thank you.